Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special Avatar Way of the Water edition of Geek Dad Life 2 Geeky TV and film reviews. And with me is a dear friend, host of the Comic Book Kaiju and so many other things. You can find him on YouTube at Vactor. I'll put a link down in the description. It's my good friend Vactor. Vactor, how you doing?
Excellent, Jay. Thank you very much for having me. You are a gentleman and a scholar, so I very much appreciate you having me.
Way too much flattery. I don't deserve a tenth of that. But I appreciate you coming on to talk about this movie because, my usual co-host for stuff on this channel is my good friend Ralph, and he was like, "I'm not watching this movie. I didn't like the first Avatar, so you have to find somebody else."
Oh,
And it's almost emblematic of this weird thing that happened to Avatar after the first film, where people just started dumping on, and I think there's fair criticisms to be made, but I almost feel like it almost went too far to the Avatar is not good, and it's like, well, no, it's still a good movie, and
right.
this is a big sequel, but it's
Yeah.
13 years and here we are. But I'm so glad I found a friend that went to go see it not only once but twice at least,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But
I would.
go ahead.
I was going to say I would have seen it another time if I didn't have a son who needed me. I would have seen it another time.
Well, the time I went to go see it, I took my kids with me.
Oh,
And I
nice.
think this is the greatest compliment I can give this film. And I think you liked it. I liked it a lot. But so Colleen did not want to see this movie with me, my wife. And so I was like, well, I want to go. Zach said he kind of wanted, he's 8 and my youngest is 4. And they saw the trailers and stuff, like, we want to go see it, Daddy. We want to go see it. I was like, but it's like 3.5 hours, kids. Are you really gonna want to sit for 3.5 hours? But since Colleen didn't want to go, it's kind of became this thing. It's like, okay, the only way I can go see this film is if I, solo dad it with my 2 kids to the movie theaters. And I was like, I'm just gonna do it. And I'll tell you what, it's the only time, and we go to the movies a lot, we're a movie going family, that both of my children sat and watched the whole movie.
Ooh.
Didn't even get restless.
Nice.
They were there in their seats watching the film the whole time.
That's the ultimate sign if a movie's good or not, is can your children sit the entire time without fidgeting? That is a massive compliment. I can't wait till my son is of the age. Right now he's about to turn 2, so he's not quite at that age yet.
Honestly, my 4-year-old's probably too young for it, but I was like, well, it's either you go or you're home alone, so you're coming with us.
Yeah.
But like, I remember at one point, it was probably like halfway there, because we went and saw the 64, or was it the 100, I don't know, the crazy frames per minute, like the most 3D version of this movie with high frame rate, right? And about halfway through, Alex just kind of, Daddy, how do they make it look like it's really there? And I was like, it's just movie magic, son.
That's great. The high frame rate. Was this your first high frame rate film that you've seen?
Yes, because there's only been a few others, right?
Right. Ang Lee had a bunch of them. He had Billy Lynn's Halftime Walk, and then the Will Smith one where he's playing a clone of himself.
Yes.
And the Hobbit movies were in high frame rate. I've always had kind of a mixed reaction to those, because like with video games, high frame rate, it's like, oh yeah, smoothness. I want that. I want the highest frame rate possible. But with films, you have that magic of 24 frames per second. That's what makes it, a movie. And with this one, I also had kind of a mixed bag with it, because it switches back and forth between the 24 and the, I think it's 48.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So that was the part that I didn't necessarily love, was the switching back and forth. I kind of wish the whole movie was in 48.
Yes.
And my wife also, well, I saw it once by myself and then once with my wife.
Okay.
And she didn't, I asked her, I said, did you like the high frame rate? She was like, yeah, it's fine. She didn't have like a glowing recommendation when she came out of it. But I wonder, I would like to see some type of interviews with James Cameron. Like, why did you make that choice? What was it about that where you said, okay, I want some to be in high and I want some to be in 24? It's interesting what goes through his head, because that's the thing. James Cameron is one of my favorite directors of all time. And if this movie, I told my wife this, I said, if this movie becomes the highest grossing movie of all time, and he's done it 3 times, he's the best one ever. You cannot deny he's the greatest director of all time. He had the highest grossing film 3 times in his career. That's just mind boggling that he even had it twice.
It is incredible, because this is such a crazy bet, you know. And there's this, it's like this kind of joke. It's like, never bet against James Cameron. But this was the one I was like, is this where the streak ends? Just because it was 13 years. And I mean, I think for a lot of us, you're like, he's never actually make it. What, he's doing 7 sequels? What the hell? Like, there's no way.
That was, all of those thoughts were running through my head in these last 13 years. I was a fan of the first Avatar. I want to say I saw it like 4 times in the theater. And it's been this thing that you can't emulate the theatrical experience for Avatar. There's some movies too, like when I saw Dark Knight in IMAX, I was like, oh man,
it does the IMAX thing. And it's like,
when it goes the full ratio, the full fills up the frame for the IMAX, I said, there's no way I can get this at home. And Avatar was the same way. So when this one came out, I said, oh yeah, I got to see it in the theater. And my wife was like, I'll wait for Disney Plus. I was like, no, you have to see this in the theater. So it paid off for me. I thought it was one of the best theatrical experiences I've had in my life, and in 2022. So you cannot bet against James Cameron. He's gonna win every time.
And it's similar, you know. I kind of went to, I was like, you know, I want to see it because I have that. Even if the movie stinks or whatever, it's gonna be a visual feast, you know. Like, and so. And honestly, the first Avatar movie was the only 3D movie that felt like a 3D movie.
Yes, 100%.
All the other ones were just like, my eyes would get blurry. I'd have to kind of like put the glasses in just a way to, and I kind of cross my eyes and maybe I can get it. But I had no problem with Avatar. And this same thing was true with this movie. It's like, can he impart this wisdom to other filmmakers? Because it was just so seamless. I didn't have that weird half in, half out 3D experience, you know?
Yeah, that was like, man, there's so many interesting side stories with this movie and with this franchise now. Like you said, with that first one, it ushered in that era, and I'm going to call it a fad, that fad of 3D. When that first movie came out, everybody wanted to be in 3D. And it just slowly died off to the point where I didn't even know they were still doing movies in 3D. You know, they had just gotten so small and so slim. But
it was almost like if the theater said, I was like, nope, give me the regular digital, whatever. There we go.
Because not only are you there's an upcharge for 3D, but also with the 3D glasses, it cuts down on the brightness of the film. So when you're watching it, and I had that with this one too, where it was like, man, I kind of wish this was not in 3D, or just turn up the brightness a little bit so I can get the full kind of clarity. But now we have Dolby. I don't know if you have Dolby in your area. That was the one I didn't. So I saw that first time I saw it in IMAX 3D, and I was like, okay, this is nice. Then the second time, I saw it in regular 3D, and I was like, oh man, I kind of wish I had seen it in Dolby 3D just to kind of get the brightness. But yeah, that was something that I was like, and even with the glasses now, I was like, oh shoot, I haven't worn 3D glasses in years. And they've slimmed them down. They've made them like sleek. So I was like, oh, this is nice. This is what 3D should be. And my wife normally gets nauseous in those other 3D movies. And I think it's because they don't have the James Cameron magic. They don't know how to do it. So like you said, he's got to write a book. He's got to do something, make a YouTube video and say, hey guys, this is how you do it. This is how you do 3D, because
3D explained.
Because what's the whole thing about 3D is that's how our eyes see things. You know, we have depth perception, and the 3D just adds another layer of immersion to it.
Yeah.
That's why I always liked 3D. Whenever I had a chance, I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to see it. But there was so many directors that just didn't take advantage of it. I
Yes.
would watch a movie in 3D, lift up my glasses, and I'm like, all right, it's not blurry. I could watch this
Yeah.
regular and not have a
Mhm.
problem. I did that with this one. I was like, let me check. Oh yeah, it's blurry. Yeah, this is real 3D. This is how you do it. So that
It
is one aspect of it, like the 3D.
yeah.
And then just it's like I said, the depth perception is the real thing about this 3D, where they have like little specks of dust
Mhm.
floating in the
Yes.
air coming at
Yeah.
you.
Or even
And
the water and
yeah, the water was, oh man, that's a whole nother thing. And we
oh,
got to talk about that just because the movie is called The Way of Water.
well,
And
I wanna take it back though to your high frame rate discussion
yes,
where to me it was I get his strategy of the whole time then it looks like a soap opera. So I get I think the strategy is okay, just sprinkle in a little bit so by the time you get into the water, it's all high frame rate, which
mm,
I think leads to like the underwater scenes work better in high frame rate than I think
yeah.
the out of the water scenes. But I've heard this from a couple different places. I almost feel like they should have Wizard of Oz'd it and just
Ooh,
gone to high frame rate once you went underwater. And then you kind of have that, okay, it's from black and white to color.
yeah,
You're underwater now, it's high frame rate. And even though it didn't, I don't think it took it away, like, because still once you're in the water, it was a transformative experience. But I think it could have that hit could have been harder. But again, I'm not gonna. That's what James Cameron wanted to do. I'm just gonna trust James Cameron judgment on it. You know.
don't you bet against James Cameron, Jay. Yeah, I actually, the Wizard of Oz moment for me
Mhm.
was when I saw the original when they re-released it in the theater last year.
Yes, and didn't
And
wasn't that their test of the high frame rate
I
for this movie or something like that?
I think
Or
so, because it did the same thing. There were
mhm.
certain action scenes that were in high frame rate, and then
Yes.
it switched back to the regular. But at the end of that, I saw the movie and I was like, "Oh yeah, that was good." And I
Mhm.
actually hadn't seen it since the original theatrical. I never watched it on
Mhm.
Blu-ray, never watched it on
Yeah.
Disney Plus.
Wow.
And because I was waiting for 4K, I was like, how do they not have 4K? This is a movie I want to
Hmm.
see in all the Ks. I want the
Yeah.
4K.
What,
So
8K?
yeah, I want 8K, 12K, put it all on there. But when actually the best part of that movie was after the film, they showed a
Mhm.
little clip from The Way of Water, and that, like, to whet your appetite.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, that was the Wizard of Oz moment for me. I was like, "Whoa!" Like, they showed the first scene when the Tukun, the whale, when they
Yes. Mhm.
came up, like, the very first time the kid, like, came across him, and it was
Yeah.
like, "This is, like, this looks real." I thought there was James Cameron did took his iPhone out and then was
Yeah.
filming his backyard. Like,
Mhm.
this looks real. So when I saw that, I was like, "All right, The Way of Water is in good hands." And then when I saw it in the actual film itself,
Mhm.
I was like, "Yeah, all the water stuff was fantastic."
Mhm.
Not only the 3D, but the high frame rate as
Yeah.
well. So, man, I gotta give my kudos to James Cameron, take my hats off to him.
Yeah, like, just every aspect of the visual experience was incredible. And something that if there's been one critique of the film, it's been in that the story is pretty, paint by the numbers or
Mhm.
or whatever. But I'll tell you what, like, yes, it's not a revolutionary story by any stretch, but there's moments in this film, and I guess we can say we can get spoilery, but there's deaths, there's emotional scenes that like I got emotional, like the big climactic, emotion, like the whole battle at the end. It was just every he's just a master of I don't know, just engaging you in a story in a way that's
Yes.
just
Mhm.
I don't.
He is he is a master storyteller, and
Mhm.
he's got, a master class that I watched. I was like, "Oh, yeah." He's one of those guys that I love to just listen to them talk,
Mhm.
and if there's, like, a commentary, if there's anything, there's an interview. I watched some, YouTube video, and it's like an hour interview, and I was, like, sitting there eating my popcorn. But when when he talks about storytelling, character
Mhm.
development, and things like that, I always find those things fascinating. And he has not made a bad movie. That's another thing of why
Yeah.
he's one of my favorite directors.
Yeah.
I can't name you a movie of his that I do
Yep.
not like.
Mm-hmm.
And with this one in particular, with the first film and with this one, I think you and I are very much on the same page with this franchise.
Mm.
The story does not blow me away, but with this one in particular, with Way of Water,
Mm-hmm.
it hits differently because I'm a father now. I was not a father
Yep.
when the first one came out, and
Yep.
then when this one came out, I
Mm-hmm.
saw my son when he raised up his son in the
Yep.
beginning. I was like, "That's my boy. That's my boy. He's blue. He's got a tail." Um, all the family stuff that hit
Yep.
me, that hit home with me, and
Mm-hmm.
protecting your family, being a
Yep.
father. What does it mean to be a father?
Yep.
So I got emotional on the family stuff, the
Yep.
family aspect of it. And
100%.
I thought he did a great job with the kids where
Yes.
they're more of the protagonist in this one
Yes.
rather than Jake Sully,
Yep.
who, if I had one criticism of the first movie,
Mm-hmm.
it was that Sam Worthington
Mm-hmm.
is the most vanilla, plain actor.
Yes.
I can't like I can't tell you anything about him that stands out
Uh-huh.
except for, "Oh, he's Australian. He's got an Australian accent." Like, I can't tell you like, he's not a bad actor, but
No.
I just nothing stands out. He's not there's nothing unique about him,
Mm-hmm.
and
Isn't that
so
his whole character? Is like he has there's nothing in his head, so the Navi could like,
yeah,
impart their
yeah,
wisdom
he
on him.
100%. He is a literal avatar. Maybe James Cameron was like, "That's what I want. I want him to be a."
You're my blank slate.
Yeah, I want him to be a blank actor. But with this one, it was great having the children be and
Mhm.
having Jake Sully in the background. It's
Yep.
like, "Oh, okay, he's fine in the background."
Yes.
But, I just loved all of those aspects of it. And, you know, there's if you really wanna get down to it, there's no original stories. Everything isn't,
Yep.
take an iteration of something else that's come
Mhm.
before it. But
Yeah,
how do you do that? Like, how
exactly.
the way that you judge it is when you watch that story, are you moved by it? Are you taken by it? Are you enjoying your time with the story? And
Mhm.
with this one, 100%, I didn't even notice the running time,
Yeah.
going into it. Both times I saw it, I didn't have to pee, I didn't have to get up.
Mhm.
So that's just a good story. And I actually think the story is better in this one
Yep.
than in the first one,
Yep.
especially having rewatched it in the theater. I think him getting those other writers and having a
Mhm.
writer's room basically on this one
Yeah.
and with the sequels, I think that really benefited
Yep.
instead of he kinda has that George Lucas, M. Night Shyamalan effect where it was like, I
Mhm.
think he got too many yes men around him,
Yeah.
and it was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep. Everything you're saying is correct. Yeah, every decision you're making, put
Yeah.
Jar Jar in there. Yeah, everything you're doing is great." And I think with this one, having those other people around and
Mhm.
having that writers room really kind of, polished it up a little bit. So I thought the story in this one was way better than the
I
first one.
heard too that like he was way or Cameron's gotten way chiller since the last
Oh.
Avatar. Like I believe, and it may have influenced this kind of family dynamic
Mm.
story,
Yeah.
but his current wife and he had a kid with I'm blanking on her name now,
Was
Linda
it
Hamilton,
Yes, yes.
and then kids with his current wife. But they basically had like, a family meeting like they have, and it's like,
Ah.
Dad, you suck. Like you keep going off to the Mariana Trench, or you're away forever, and then you come home and expect it to but you're not here. You're not
Mm.
here for us, and you say things like how you would do it, and then think we should do it that way. And it was almost like this, calling him out on his
Mm.
BS. And I think I saw an interview. I heard Kate Winslet, maybe Sigourney Weaver said, because both Kate Winslet and Sigourney Weaver have worked with him before. Actually, they all have worked with him before. But
Yeah.
they said like this
Okay.
is the calmest and chillest James Cameron's ever been, because his reputation has
Yeah.
been more of a authoritative, like this is my
Yes.
vision, you're gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
that's one of those things where it was like, I had always heard horror stories about him, and it was
mhm.
I like the art. I don't necessarily like the artist from the
Sure,
stories that I've heard. I don't have any firsthand experience
sure.
of meeting him, but and
Mhm.
that was what my wife said to me. I was like, he's one of the best directors. And she's like, yeah, too bad he's a terrible person. I was like, I guess, I don't know, but that's good to hear. In
Mhm.
his old age, he's kind of mellowing out and
Well,
chilling out.
the other thing I really dug too, that I saw, because there's kid actors in this film, and hell, by the time they probably get to the next one, they're gonna be like 72 years old.
Yeah, right. Yep. Even
It's
in the press tour, I'm already seeing them, and I'm like, oh, in the movie, your voice was really high, and now it broke already, and now you sound like it's deeper than my voice. Yeah.
and but I think there was like one of the kid actors, like, but he basically like made it in their contract they didn't have to do the insane press tours. Like, it's like, these are
Ooh.
kids, you don't have to do all this crap. Like, you can just do the movie and I'll
Oh,
cover for you or whatever.
nice.
So again, I just I think there is the warmth and that family story. I don't, again, I'm not in his head, but I feel like there's also an element of that too, of him mellowing out and
Mhm.
trying to be a better father, and
Yeah.
that
I
translates to
could
the story a little bit.
Yeah, I could definitely feel that, and man, that even from that first trailer when they have that line of
Hmm.
"This family is our fortress,"
Yes.
that hits home to me, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you're the same way.
Yeah.
Movies and TV shows, comic books, anything, stories hit differently now for me as a
Mhm.
father,
Yeah.
and things that just went right over my head before. Like, I was watching Cars the other day, the Pixar movie,
Uh-huh.
with my son. That's his favorite movie. He loves
Yeah,
Cars.
it's about that age of like Cars, it's Cars everything.
And I always hated Cars. Like, I'm a huge Pixar guy,
Yeah.
and Cars was always my least favorite, to the point where I didn't even realize they had a Cars 3, and now I'm watching it every day. But
Cars
that's
2 is dreadful though. Cars 3 is fine. Cars 1 I like. Cars 2, even now I'm just like, sorry kids, you can watch that one. I can't watch this
the
crap.
only thing that saves Cars 2 for me is the Japan scenes, and that's because I lived in Japan. I'm part Japanese, so I
Mhm.
have like a secondary love for that. But
Mhm.
I'm with you on the overall, like, making Mater the protagonist and all that. Anyways, Cars hits differently now to me. Like, that
Mhm.
there's a family aspect in that
Yeah.
movie, and there's just I see things differently now,
Yeah.
having this firsthand experience of
Mhm.
being a father. And so I
Yeah.
knew going into this, I said, this family stuff is gonna hit me, and
Mhm.
it did, and that was how I got my wife, because, like I said, she didn't wanna see it in the
Yeah.
theater. She wanted to wait, and I said, "No, you gotta number 1, you have to see it because we're
Mhm.
not gonna get we don't have an IMAX screen in our house. We don't have,
Few do.
yeah, we're not
I
gonna be
don't
able
know,
to."
does anybody have like a true IMAX screen in their house like that? You would
I
need,
haven't Yeah, that would be cool to see, because I haven't seen any, like, "Oh, yeah, Schwarzenegger's got one." I haven't heard
right? Because
any stories about
it's
that.
7 stories, isn't it? A
Yeah,
true IMAX
a
screen?
true one, yeah, because they have, like, the fake, the Limax, but, yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't heard any celebrities, but that might be a
That'd be a
goal,
big flex.
maybe.
Like, that's the true flex right there.
Yeah, but that was one aspect of it, to get my wife and entice
Yeah.
her to see it.
I'm
The
I'm
second
I'm
Okay.
curious, because from a mother's perspective, like, how did she, take that story? Because I feel like, so
Natiri?
there's Aldana's character. What's
Oh,
her name
yes,
again?
Natiri.
Materi, thank you. Like, her art, if there's one criticism I wanna say, like, she's almost underused in this film, but the
Yeah.
last act,
Mhm.
it's such a gut-wrenching performance,
Yes,
and it's
yes.
so impactful. Like, what was her perspective of, like, that back end of that story?
Yeah, I think that really hit home for her, and even, like I said, when the first son was raised up, I could
Mhm.
see, some tears coming into my wife's eyes. I think it hit her the same way,
Mhm.
the Zoe Saldana stuff. And another thing, my wife is very Natiri-esque in the way that
Okay,
her personality.
okay.
So, we always have a laugh, even in the scene where they first meet and she's about to
Mhm.
kill him,
Yes.
and he's like, "You're like a baby. You're
Yeah.
stupid." I was like, "That's you, that's you, talk to me." So, she always laughs, she always has, like, she feels a connection, and I'm the vanilla Jake Sully, and she's the cool Natiri, but I think she had the same reaction in this one, especially. Oh, are we doing spoilers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're talking about the movie, so
Okay.
here I'll put another little spoiler here, but we haven't really spoiled anything. Well, I'll give a little spoiler alert. Here we go. It's your last. Again, I would think somebody clicked on this video. We assume
Yeah.
we're talking about this. Go ahead.
So when the oldest son dies,
Yeah.
like the scream, the guttural scream
Oh,
from Zoe Saldana, that number one, give her the Oscar. That was
yeah.
fantastic. I think that hit my wife. And then the scene in the afterlife when they're seeing the son when he's
Yes.
fishing, that hit
Hmm.
number one, that hit me where it
Yeah.
was like, okay, must be some dust in there in this theater.
Hmm.
But I think it hit her the same way.
Yeah.
So all of the she's exactly like me where she sees things differently now.
Hmm.
And there was a couple times where I leaned over to her and I was like, "There he is. There's our son. There he is." And she was like, "Yep, that's him." So she saw him in both of the sons, some of his kind of
Hmm.
mannerisms. So yeah, I think she had the same reactions that I did.
What was interesting with my two kids, because I have two boys, 8 and 4, like I said, and so it was interesting to see like the older brother, younger brother dynamic, and both for my sons Zach and Alex, they were not exactly the same as these two kids, but there's similarities there. But it hit my oldest son pretty hard when the
Ooh.
the oldest son died in the movie, because like even then Zach was just like, was that was he the oldest son? I was like, yeah, he just died, and it's just like I could almost see him just like, damn, damn,
Yeah.
that's
Actually,
heavy.
that moment when he died, my
Mhm,
wife, I heard her gasp, and I was like, "Oh,
mhm.
that really hit her." And I was kinda surprised too when that happened, but that
Really,
was
I almost the second the younger son started getting all of the development, because they didn't really have much between the two other than the younger one was kind of knucklehead and
yeah.
the older one is the responsible one or
Yeah.
whatever. But the
Mhm.
second there was the whale relationship with the younger son, I was like, oh damn, are they gonna kill the older son? Because he didn't really get much character development. That was the only another thing, maybe a little nitpick. They almost let it be known too well that that
Mm.
was going to be a son that could die, because they didn't really
Yeah.
spend any time developing him beyond he's the responsible one that follows all the rules or whatever.
Yeah. That went over my head, the first time, but when he died, then I looked back on it and I was like, "Oh, yeah, he didn't really have much to do in this movie,
Mhm,
and the younger son got a bulk of it." So, yeah, it makes sense why he was kind of expendable, but
mhm,
it didn't hit me it went over my head the first time I saw it. The second time I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, yeah, we can clearly see from the beginning, there's
mhm.
even foreshadowing on that."
Did you I also thought Jake Sully was gonna die. Like, I thought
Ooh.
before, like, as he was, like, drowning or whatever, like, he thought he wasn't gonna be able to get out
Mm.
of the sinking ship. I was like, "Damn, is Jake Sully gonna die?" I was just like, I thought anybody could die. I thought maybe some of the kids would live, but I thought the parents could die. Like, I didn't know where it was gonna go.
And that's good because we already know about the sequels. Like if
Yes.
this was one that he hadn't announced 90 sequels ahead of time, that would have been something that I'm like, "Oh yeah, anybody can die." But in
Mhm,
my mind, I've got that I'm like, "Oh yeah, there's a insurance card." Like he's making all these other ones, so obviously Zoe Saldana is going to be there. Obviously, Jake Sully's going to be there. That's
do
the
you
way
need
that
them
I
there?
was.
No, you got these kids. They're cute.
Well,
They're cooler.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was thinking about that too. At what point do the kids become maybe that's the last sequel. The
Sure.
kids are old enough to take over
Yeah.
because the way that as I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, they're doing water in this one. Maybe the next one is." I was thinking snow, but then
Mhm.
they came out and said, "Oh yeah, the next one's gonna have fire." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh yeah, they can do like Star Wars where it was like every planet is a different
Mhm.
environment."
Yeah.
And then that's what I was focusing on when I was watching the movie. But then at the end, they were like, "Oh wait, no, you guys are water tribe now. You're staying here."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, okay. Maybe they're
Yeah.
not going around and doing all the other
Well,
places."
I agree, like, because there was that I was like, "Oh, they're just gonna go to, like, they're gonna go to a different tribe every movie or
Yeah, yeah,
something,"
yeah.
But to your point, like, when I said, "No, you're with us," I was like, "Oh, okay. Alright, we'll see how that plays out." But there are so many other, like, I think they've been exploring the video game stuff like that. Who knows if it'll play out that way, but, like a fire tribe, and there's, like, a true, flyer tribe,
Ooh.
like, it's the the
They're
Navi
copying
that
Last Airbender.
right. So the Navi from the first one are like the forest people, even though they do fly, but there's like true flyers or something like that. So anyway, there's a lot. There's one thing I was like, how are you gonna make 5 movies out of this? But the greatest way to say he could do it is the first, I don't know, act of the film is him fast forwarding through 12 years of story. Like if he could just like basically fast forward through it, scrub through it, and then just go to like 12, 13 years later, he's clearly got enough story in his mind, or at least enough things in his mind to go to.
Yeah. Well, you know what was interesting? I was reading a review that opened my eyes a little bit on something. This movie is way more of a world building setup for sequels than the first one was.
Yes.
Where there's ties and there's like threads that are not addressed. There's things that we don't get a full story on. So I think 100% having those sequels in mind, having the fact that they're filming them at the same time, they're writing them at the same time, that I think benefits the overall story.
Yeah.
And the first one, you almost can just go in cold and just watch this one because there is so much building versus the first one's all about Jake Sully and his journey.
Yeah.
And this one kind of has the same thing with the bad guy, Miles Quaritch.
So let's talk about that Quaritch, right? He dies at the end of the first one. Spoiler alert. And he's brought back into this film, and I thought it was really clever how they did it, where it's like, him looking at a video of himself that he sent before. Like, if I die, I'm not going to die, but if I die, they're going to implant like a backup of my brain into, this avatar body. And then there's his son that was left behind, Spider. And it was just this other, B plot or, side storyline to this film that I didn't know how it would be pulled off, because I knew he was going to be back as like an avatar in this movie. But I thought it was really good. Like I really liked it. What was your thoughts on the Quaritch kind of storyline?
I really liked that as well. It was just kind of strange that the kid popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, I don't think they had that. I don't think James Cameron was thinking about that when he wrote the first one. But him, and this is there's so many like threads I'm thinking of. Stephen Lang and Sigourney Weaver, both actors are like 70 in their 70s and playing these. I think that's another like revolutionary thing about this movie is that with this technology, they can play younger versions of themselves, and it's just their acting talent. That's all there is. There's no wrinkles on their face. There's nothing you're seeing. You're just able to kind of cut through the oldness and get right to the acting. So his character, and also I had the biggest laugh of this movie. There's a couple of funny parts in the movie, but the biggest laugh to me was when he was explaining to himself, he was watching that video, and I'm going to mess up the line, but he's like, you can't kill a Marine. They just come back from hell or something like that. Like whatever the line was, talking about Marines go to hell. They come back and get you from hell or something. I laughed the loudest in the theater. I laughed both times, but he was great. Stephen Lang, that was the first time I'd ever seen him, was in the first Avatar. And then that he had that movie, the horror movie where he was blind and he was taking out the intruders. That movie was great, but I thought his storyline echoing Jake Sully in the first one was interesting because it's everything he hated about, the first one was like hating the Na'vi, but now he is a Na'vi. That was interesting because now he's got all of those strengths, but none of the weaknesses of being a human. And then on the other side of it, him being a clone and having memories, like all of those things are interesting to me. I always love clone storylines. Spider-Man,
sure, exactly. Like what's you're them, but you're not. So
what makes you?
Who are you?
Yeah, and so that stuff was always interesting to me. And then his son and their connection that they had, and his, you're nothing to me. Like, we literally are nothing to each other,
Yeah.
but I can help you out. And then at the end, you can
Mm-hmm.
see they both had that father-son
Yep.
connection where they both wanted to save each other.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see what happens. I almost can see Spider becoming a bad guy by the end of it. This as
Mm-hmm.
the sequels progress, him having his connection to his father. It one of two, either
Mm-hmm.
Courage becomes good or Spider
Yeah.
becomes bad. Like I could see both of those happening. And I just thought, like I said, his acting is what made him great because he's one of those guys, kind of like Christoph Waltz. Like you
Mm-hmm.
love to hate him. He's such a
Yes.
good actor.
Yes.
Gary Oldman too. Like when he
Mm-hmm.
play villains and you're like, man, he's so good, but I hate him.
Mm-hmm.
I want to punch him in the face. And Stephen Lang was like that throughout. And I actually,
But there was a little bit more humanity to him in the saving his son thing. Like that whole dynamic change. Again, he was, even though he's not human anymore, he was more human. Like, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Like, and that made it more compelling of a bad guy in a way.
and that's why I can see him turning too, because he's not just a mustache twirling villain like he
Mm-hmm.
was in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Now he has more humanity. Now there's more shades of gray,
Yep.
and I just like him. So this movie, I think, made me kind of change my tune on his character.
Mm-hmm.
I started liking, actually, as the movie was progressing, I was kind of on his path of, oh, he's the protagonist. Like I was seeing the movie through his eyes.
Interesting. Okay.
And so I thought that was just another kudos to the filmmakers of
Yes.
making me care about that character.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really care about Spider, but because
Yeah. Out of
Spider
all,
was his.
he was kind of meh. I think the tough part for him is he's supposed to be like 13 or something. And it could be how it was filmed, and he probably was 18, but actually, I think he still was only 16 or something. And maybe because he was just like so shredded because he was like, living with the Navi.
Yeah.
But he
That
looked like he was 37.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy too, because yeah, you see him as a baby in that one shot and he's running around. The next thing you know, oh, he looks like he's a man now. But
Uh-huh.
I was watching some behind the scenes stuff on him, and number one, he was the kid from Endgame that was riding his bike when Paul Rudd comes back and he's like
Oh,
looking around. So that was his first movie.
oh
And
wow.
yeah, he was talking about how he booked Avatar as he was on the set of Endgame. Like
Oh wow.
He was talking to Paul Rudd. He's like, "Yeah, I just booked Avatar." Um,
No, but
but he also talked about how he was like he worked with a trainer, and I was like, "What is going on? This guy's doing sets and he's doing reps." That's how he
makes
got
sense 'cause he's
shredded.
shredded. He's like
Yeah.
Tarzan's kid or
I
something.
thought he was just natural, but he was like, "Yeah, I was overweight." I was like, "Oh, dang. Well, this guy's a man." But yeah, that character, I just maybe in the sequels we'll like him more because yeah, he's just Monkey Boy. That's
Yeah.
oh, and the relationship between him and Sigourney Weaver's character, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really feel it that much the first time
Uh-huh.
I saw it, but the second viewing, I was like, oh shoot, they're setting it up from the
Yes.
beginning. The very
Mm-hmm.
first time you see
Yep.
them, there's like, okay, I can see this connection between them because
Mm-hmm.
they didn't go over the top with it. They didn't like
Which you
beat you over the
couldn't, right?
head.
Because they're like they're young teens, so you can't go full romance. So it's kind
Right.
of like
Well, and
you
also,
mature.
that Sigourney Weaver's 70,
Yeah,
80 years
that
old. So
too. It's like, yeah, it's a 72-year-old with a
I was
50-year-old or
I
whatever.
was thinking about that. I was like, man, this is kind of weird. I was
You
thinking
gotta
about
you gotta wait till they're all adults before you.
yeah, yeah. And another I was watching some behind the scenes stuff, which there's a ton of really good
Oh, it's
behind the
incredible.
scenes stuff out there.
It
But
blows my mind that, so like, even all the underwater stuff, like they just filmed it was still mocapped, like they still acted it all like underwater.
yeah, because they talk about all the actors had to hold their breath, which
Mm-hmm.
was the same thing for Wakanda Forever. So I was like, dang, these two movies came out very close to each other, and all
Mm-hmm.
the actors had to film all these underwater scenes. Both of them did a great job, but the kids in general
Sigourney
are
Weaver in her 70s, I think she said she maxed out at like 6.5 minutes underwater holding her breath. And
yeah,
then Kate Winslet broke the record for
yes,
film at like
yeah.
7:15 or something.
So that's another
Incredible.
one where you cannot bet against James Cameron. Like, that guy is a fantastic director. Like, the fact that he could do that and get all of these great performances
Oh yeah.
underwater, like, just thinking about new technology and new ways of
Mhm.
filming stuff is always fascinating for me. And that's James Cameron. Like, I think he's a pioneer
Mhm.
on he's kind of like George Lucas. Like,
Yeah.
he sets the standard for a lot of
Mhm.
these things. I wonder if we're gonna see a high frame rate fad like we did with the 3D with this after these sequels. That'll be interesting to see
I
because
wonder if there's a lesson from, like, post Avatar, be like, "But you're not James Cameron,
yeah,
so don't."
yeah.
Or
And he talked about it's just a tool. It's not like,
Mhm.
don't think about it in anything else, but it's a filmmaking tool and you
Yes.
just have that in your bag and you can
Mhm.
use it, but use it properly instead of just
Yeah.
being spectacle and like, oh, I've got 3D, just throw it on there.
Yeah.
And you're not even when you're filming the movie, you're not even thinking about how
Yeah.
is this going to look in 3D.
Yeah.
But I I just every time I was watching Sigourney Weaver's teenage Kiri, I think her name is. Every
Mhm.
time I was watching her,
Here,
I
yeah.
just I was imagining her walking around with these kids as a 70-year-old and then
Mhm.
the relationship. That's where it was like, it's kind of weird to think about
Mhm.
her walking around with this little kid.
Yeah.
And she talked about like most of her, I think like 90% of her stuff was with the kids.
Yeah.
But again, she just did a great job of
It
making
was a
you,
seamless performance, like, it's and Kiri's an amazing character,
yeah.
like, a really compelling
And
character.
you can see they're setting her up
Oh,
to
yeah.
be the Jedi, like, she's got the Force,
Yep.
she's gonna be able to manipulate things
Yep.
and have that connection with nature, so I
Mhm.
think it'll be interesting to watch her powers grow
Yep.
as we go through
Oh, man, when she had the
the
thing where
films.
she got, like, the sea anemones to, like, attack or whatever, I was like, "Yeah, let's
Yeah,
go."
my wife had the same reaction, she loved that, but yeah, her connection with nature was
Mhm.
really cool, and I liked her character the most. Like you said, one of the only downsides to me of the film was some characters kinda took a back seat.
Mhm. Yep.
Neytiri, the older son, and
Mhm.
the youngest daughter, Took, um,
Yeah.
she had, like,
She
she
was
was cute.
adorable, though.
Yeah, she was
Every time, like, she was in peril, I was like, "You better not kill the cute better not kill the cute one."
She was great. Actually, it was funny, when I was watching it the first time, I thought she was a boy, and then, later on, when they were talking about her, referring
Mhm.
to her, I was like, "Wait a minute," 'cause, boys and girls have the same vocal
Yeah.
pitch at that age, but,
Yeah, yeah.
it was funny, her character just she doesn't have a lot to do, but she
Mhm.
has that moment when she calls out like, "Oh, man, how did I get tied up again? How did I get
Yeah.
captured again?" Which the whole audience was thinking that and laughed
Mhm.
when she
Yeah,
had that
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Did you here's a question. Have
yeah.
you been to Avatar Land
I
in Disney
haven't.
World?
I haven't.
I've
How I hear it's amazing. I've heard it's amazing.
It's great, and what's interesting about Pandora
Mhm.
is they the story, which I love about Disney, like,
Mhm.
all of everything is based on story.
Sure,
So,
yeah.
the story of that land in Disney World
Mhm.
is you as a tourist, and it's
Mhm.
you're not Jake Sully, you're not going
Yeah.
through it. So, I thought it was kinda brilliant the way that they did that, the way that they set it up, and so you're having this wonder and this awe of discovering everything, seeing
Mhm.
the floating mountains,
Yeah.
riding on the Ekrons, which that
Mhm.
ride is one of my before Rise of the Resistance came out, that was my favorite ride at
Really?
Disney.
Wow.
So, if you have a chance, definitely
Yep.
especially now that these films are out. Oh, and
Mhm.
what was weird, I heard that the storyline in the park takes place after the movies, which I don't know how they're gonna do that, but, there's the Ikran ride is really good,
Mhm.
and then there's a river ride, which they have this animatronic, Na'vi
Mhm.
that it freaks me out, like, it looks real, and
Yeah.
you're kinda in the dark alone with this thing, and I'm, like, thinking this thing is gonna come out at me and take me out, so that's the only thing, but Pandora is great, I highly recommend it, but it has a new life now
Mhm.
that these sequels are coming out,
Yeah.
because the first movie that's what's so interesting about this franchise
Mhm.
is it was the highest grossing film of all time,
Yep.
and it had almost no cultural impact,
Yep.
where you didn't hear anyone talking about it. You
Yep.
didn't hear anyone dressing up as a
Mhm.
Na'vi for Halloween.
Yeah,
It
or
was just
Comic-Con or whatever, yeah.
yeah, it was so interesting to me that it just didn't have that grip. And like I said, I didn't watch it until it
Mhm.
re-released in the theater, which I normally, like a movie like that, I'm normally watching on streaming or Blu-ray
Mhm.
every year.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, with these sequels, are we going to see more toys? Are we going to get into more shirts and,
Yeah.
paraphernalia of Pandora, of
Yep.
being on that world? I think that'll be interesting to
It's
see.
I'm glad you brought it up because it is interesting, the original film when it came out, Mattel had the master, license for the toys and stuff like that. And the brand manager at the time, Scott Knightlick, cared more about DC, and
Ooh.
he's also a Hot Wheels manager. And it was really half baked. The toys and
Mm.
stuff were really half baked. Um, I got what was the red Banshee, the big one. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah. I
But
know who you're talking about.
anyway,
Yeah.
that one was okay, but it was so rigid. And then the
Uh,
figures they looked like crap.
uh,
Um, and
I
so
can't even remember seeing any,
it didn't
like,
last long. They got clearance pretty quick. That's when I picked them up. I picked them up on
oh.
clearance. And but they just looked so bad. I was like, they didn't last long in the toy room. But this go round, McFarlane Toys has the
Yeah.
license, and
Yeah.
they've released quite a few figures based off the first film. And I think there's also some ones
Ooh.
for the new film. But I gotta be honest, I don't want to say McFarlane's doing a bad job, but like I see this film, I'm like, okay, now maybe I want like the current Jake Sully and the kids.
Mhm.
The Jake Sully that I see like at Target and stuff is like movie one Jake Sully, and
Oh.
like the new Jake Sully looks way cooler than first movie Jake
Yeah.
Sully. And
Mhm.
so like hopefully the merch lasts longer this time. And to your point, like I feel like now that there's two movies, and this one obviously, I think what did he say, had to make $2 billion worldwide for it to
Yeah.
break even. So we're not there yet, but it seems like it's on a path to
It'll be
win.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a world that I don't know, there's something about, or it's so it was I didn't rewatch the first movie going into seeing this film. Um, for whatever reason. And it was something like it put me back in Pandora,
Mm.
and it made me remember why the movie like was so incredible the
Yes.
first time I
Yes.
saw it. And to your point, but it didn't have that thing that kept me there. But now seeing it, and then I rewatched the first movie afterwards with the boys because they
Oh,
loved
nice.
the other one so much. And
Yeah,
I was
they
like,
weren't born when the first one came out.
no,
Yeah.
exactly. I wasn't even born when. No, I'm kidding. Long ago, but but now, and when they did the land at Disney, I was like, is people don't really care? Like, this movie was like 6 years ago, and those next ones will never come out. But to your point, now it's just like the ecosystem. Again, it's just James Cameron's always
Don't bet against it.
don't bet against them.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see if this time it'll take off, because that would be such an interesting story of, yeah, it didn't capture the zeitgeist the first time, but it did the second time. That would be interesting.
But
Or
is
does
it
it not?
because too? Because the first movie was successful. It's like, oh, we're gonna make two sequels. They'll come out in 2013 and 2015 or whatever it was. But it was 13 years. So maybe since I believe they filmed the 2 and 3 back to back, and
Yes.
4 and
Mhm,
5 will come
mhm.
later. But maybe now that another sequel won't be 13 years away, it'll come back into our minds sooner,
That
right?
makes sense. Yeah. That would be, I think that would be more logical, of staying in people's minds. And it was, what was fascinating about the first one also was, like you said, the reason why people loved it was they wanted to be in Pandora. They wanted to
Yes.
live in that world. And I
Mhm.
saw reports online where people were like, I'm having suicidal thoughts because I can't actually live in Pandora. I was
Oh,
like,
oh,
dang, they were seeing the movie 9, 10 times. And
yeah.
that's probably why the box office was so high. But the fact that Pandora gripped them so hard, and I
Mhm.
was like, "Yeah, I like Pandora, it's cool," but, I'd rather be on Endor. I'd rather be in Star Wars. But that is what I think made the theme park. Maybe that's what got it greenlit, was that
Sure.
they saw people were like really wanting to go to
Yeah.
Pandora. So with these sequels, I think that's going to be also interesting to watch. Is, are people really loving that world again and wanting to go back? And they did a fantastic job on the world building as well, having the whole water tribe. Like, we didn't even know these guys existed in the first one. And
they have like different tails and hands and
I thought
skin tones and
all of that stuff
tattoos
was
and
fascinating. They did a great job on just changing it up and showing that, hey, and the tribal leader was like, "You guys will be useless to me here." When they first landed,
yeah.
"You are the tree people. Get out of here. We can't use
Your
you."
little tails.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And what was crazy? I didn't even realize that was Kate Winslet at first when I saw
Same.
it.
It was like, oh wait, that was Kate Winslet. It was an
Yeah.
incredible performance.
And then the second time I saw it, I was like, "Oh, okay, I can kind of see." And that was the same thing with Jake Sully. I couldn't tell you Sam Worthington's facial expressions. I couldn't tell you his movements, but Zoe Saldana, I was like, that looks like Zoe Saldana, acts like Zoe Saldana, her face. And that's another thing. We haven't even mentioned this. I thought in the first movie, what was more revolutionary was not the 3D. 3D was fantastic, but it was the facial motion capture, to the point where it looked like a person with makeup on. And this one, I thought they've improved it
Whole nother
even
level.
in more.
Whole nother level.
So that, to me,
and I wonder, is it because not to knock on Zemeckis, but like the Uncanny Valley or whatever, but like, does it benefit them that they're big blue aliens, so they don't have to look exactly human, just kind of human? Like, do they benefit from that, or is it the tech and his Cameron's approach just that miles better than everybody else's, to where you don't have a dead eye look to them or something?
I think it's a little bit of both, because over the holiday, Polar Express came on, and I went over to my in-laws, and they wanted to watch it. I don't like that movie.
Neither do I.
When it came on, I was like, "Hey, this looks." After I had just seen Avatar, this looks bad. Like the Uncanny Valley, like you said, and the technology of that time, it just didn't look
Polar
good.
Express just like, I don't know, like 3 years before Avatar.
I swear Polar Express was like 03.
Oh, maybe
Like,
it is. I don't know.
Let me look this up. That was something that when it came out.
04 is Polar Express.
So that technology at the time, and I remember people being like, "Oh, it's so realistic." I was like, "This don't look good at all to me." But the facial, like I said, being able to capture every facial tick, and they just have bigger eyes, and they're just a little bit larger. But I was like, "That's Zoe Saldana with blue makeup on. This is not CG."
Yeah.
James Cameron has fooled me again.
Yeah.
That, to me, I think is the real revolutionary thing. And I would like to see more movies pick up that and use that to the point where it's like, 13 years later, I still feel like, and Avatar aged really well. Like I said, rewatching it, it was like, dang, this looks like it could come out today. And I think he was so far ahead, and people just have not picked up the ball.
Yeah.
So that technology across the board, I think. And the same thing with Lucas, the same thing he did with like digital filmmaking. It just took a while for everybody to kind of catch on to it. I think James Cameron's the same way, trailblazer. And we haven't even talked about James Cameron's strengths. He might be the best action director of all time. Anytime there's an action scene, you compare a Michael Bay action scene to a James Cameron action scene, and it's like night and day. Like, you cannot tell what is going on in those Transformer movies. And Avatar, I'm like, I know every place, I know every location of what is going on in this action.
And the physics of everything. Like, there's rules, like there's boundaries and space, and I don't know, just like you're 100% right. The whole last act is incredible. Just
Yes.
from like and even
Dang.
when it's the back end of that last act is a sinking ship. It's like, oh, we're going back to this well. Are we James Cameron? But he's still so good at it. Like it's still so good.
It's funny. My wife leaned over to me. She's like, "Why is he doing this again?" And it didn't hit me when I watched it the first time. Then I saw it the second time. I was like, "Oh yeah, it is kind of Titanic-esque." But yeah, if it's good enough, I'll forgive, a retread of it. If it's
It
just
wasn't
like,
a pure reach, but there was my son oldest is obsessed with the Titanic,
oh
and
wow.
so like let's watch the Titanic movie. We skipped over some of the booby scenes, but we saw
Oh yeah, yeah.
but but the sinking part, so like all of those set pieces of that film, which again I think a lot of people just, maybe if you haven't seen it in a while, you think of it as this romantic tragedy movie, but the actual action, again, back half last act action of that film is incredible. So it was fascinating to see, not exactly beat for beat, like for like, but similar feel to the claustrophobicness of a sinking ship and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How do you work through
Man,
it?
that last action scene is fantastic. Just the all of the whales, all of the
Mm-hmm.
Na'vi, and
Yep.
then the Jake and Miles Corch
Mm-hmm.
fight scene. All
Mm-hmm.
of those things. Oh, a Natiri going out and taking
Oh,
everybody out. Yeah.
and
Every
I think that scene's in the trailer, right? Which is like coming in, but like that was just like a little itty bitty taste of like what it ended up being, and it was just incredible,
Yeah,
absolutely incredible.
no notes. There's nothing that you can tell me that he could have improved upon. And it's crazy to me that he's still doing it. Like he's not a spring chicken anymore.
No.
Like James Cameron is getting up there in age
Mm-hmm.
and he's still making these. I mean, it's like George Miller with now I'm blanking
Mad
on the name.
Max.
Yeah, Mad Max Fury Road. Like
Mm-hmm.
how does this man make this great action? And
Mm-hmm.
he's old. He's not a young guy
But
anymore.
where again, I would separate Miller from Cameron. It's like Miller's good if it's a Mad Max movie. Otherwise, it's
What
right.
was it? Happy Feet? There's great action scenes in Happy Feet.
But like again, just Cameron, it may only be once every 10, 20 years, but it's gonna be good. And so now the next feat he's going to pull off is, can you make another great movie like only 2 years later?
Yeah,
Like that,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Man, I'm not gonna bet against him, but yeah, if it doesn't turn out, I'll be disappointed. But man, I was just thinking about it when you said that last action scene, like the last half of the movie is that action scene. I was in my mind, I was revisiting it. I was like, oh shoot, I want to watch this movie again. That was the like the whale having the armor on his head, and when they bounced off his head, I was like, yeah,
And then the whale poacher getting his arm ripped off. The
yeah,
whole theater cheered. I don't know if it was ever. It was like,
yes, yes, same. So that was great. And that's just great storytelling, setting
yes.
up the what happened, and then setting up
Mhm.
how bad that guy is,
Yep.
and Jermaine Clement from Flight of the
Yes.
Conchords being there. I had that Leonardo DiCaprio
Yes.
meme. I did that in the theater. Uh, but yeah, that just some great stuff
Yes.
from
Agreed.
Cameron.
But again, that's where it's like he uses story shorthand where it's not going to be a ton of plot, and he uses the simple visceral story points, so you don't waste any time. It's just like okay, it's a poacher, he's a bad guy, whatever. Like he didn't have to he didn't spend that much time at all, but you already understood almost immediately all of the motivators for that character, right? Another one we haven't talked about just real quick, but Edie Falco,
Oh yeah,
her
yeah,
general, was it General Ardmore? Again, we maybe got like 2 minutes with her, but it's all we needed to fully understand her character, right?
yes. Did you
Um,
see the thing that came out where she was like, I didn't even know this movie came out. Like she filmed it 4 years ago, and she's like, I thought it came out and flopped, and I never heard about it. Yeah, she was great in her limited role. When I watched it
mhm.
the second time, I was like trying to because the first time I was trying to pick up on everything that was
Yeah.
happening, and then I was like, oh yeah, she'll come back later. Watching it the second time, knowing she doesn't come back later in the
Mhm.
movie, I was kind of focusing on her performance and her early stuff, and I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
I like her character,
Yep.
and I'm looking forward to seeing her in the future in the other
Yeah.
sequels.
Yep. I agree. I agree.
We
Go ahead.
we talked a little bit before we were live about the Vin Diesel
Yes,
appearance in
because
this
we were
movie.
looking up cast lists, kind of getting our notes together here. Did you figure out who he is in this movie?
I
No?
still have not found him. I don't know who he is. I My thought is that he's in the sequel and they just messed
Is he like
up.
a background character? Because so when you Google it and it shows cast, it puts Vin Diesel in there for some reason. But then when I'm going on IMDb here, I'm not seeing Vin Diesel at all. So I don't know if it's a weird Google issue or
I
something.
think that's what it is because right next to Vin Diesel is Michelle Yeoh, and it says she actually has a character name. Vin Diesel does not have a character name below him.
Yeah.
So maybe Michelle Yeoh is in the sequels also because I didn't see her in this one. And how are you gonna have her as a background character? There's no way that they would do that. So she must be in the sequels as another character, and they just messed up. But maybe Vin Diesel's a producer.
Dr. Karina.
Yeah, who is that?
I
There
don't know.
Like there were no doctors in this movie. We didn't see anyone.
Mm.
I think it's a mess. I
Or
think it's
maybe the role got cut out. I know you don't cut out
ooh.
Michelle. Yeah, you do not cut out.
Yeah,
her,
yeah,
so.
no. Not there's no way. Man, and we didn't even talk about the kids in the water tribe. That was really I thought that was interesting. Like they had
Mhm.
the the bullies and they
Yes.
were kind of pushing the story forward and then they had the daughter who had the
Mhm.
love interest with the younger
Little
son.
little bit of a Romeo and Juliet kind of deal, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
she was great.
they didn't really. Again, they're kind of probably setting that for later, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't full star-crossed lovers, whatever. It was
Yeah.
kind of just like,
Very
she
subtle.
told her whale friend, just like, there's this boy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was very I was again watching it the second time knowing what happened. I was kind of focusing on that and I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, yeah, I can see it's just very slight
Mhm.
versus the first time it kind of breezed over my head."
Yeah.
But yeah, they did a great I mean, there's a lot of stuff I think they're setting up for the sequel that we won't know
Mhm.
until we get the full franchise. That's
Yeah.
also interesting. The point that we're at right now is kind of like being in the middle of Lost, and it's like you don't know
Sure.
what's coming out next.
Yeah.
There's yeah, just kind of you don't know how what to form your opinion fully
Mhm.
on because we just
Yeah.
don't have enough. But yeah, just if we just take this slice of Way of Water, I thought it was a great time at the movies.
Mhm.
It has to be seen on the biggest screen possible.
Yeah.
The high frame rate makes it look realistic. The underwater scenes look fantastic. The motion
Yep.
capture, facial,
Mhm.
everything looks great. James Cameron action, amazing.
Yep.
And I think the story is better in
Yep.
this one than in the first one. The family, focusing on the family is more interesting than
Yep.
focusing on Vanilla Sully. I think this one is a better way to do it.
You know what? I can't agree with you more. I think the family story, again, even if it's not revolutionary, but it doesn't need to be. And it works really well. And again, I kind of I I've been pushing against movies having to be 3 hours.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
Prey. I loved Prey because it was an hour, a tight hour 35 or whatever it was. I was like, damn, why can't movies be an hour 35 anymore?
Yes, yeah.
Um,
I'm the same way.
and maybe it's just like being a parent and just like I don't got 3 hours.
Yes,
Like
100%. You know, I have fallen behind on so many TV shows and movies in 2022 because I'm a father now,
mm-hmm,
and most of my time is spent watching my son.
mm-hmm,
It's I'm the same way. I'm like, when something is a 5-episode TV show,
mm-hmm,
6 episodes, they're 20-minute episodes, I'm like,
mm-hmm.
"Yes, this is great, I can actually keep up." It's not an hour-long 13, 20-episode seasons.
100%, 100%. But that being said, this, even though it is a 3 hour plus, I feel like it keeps you in throughout. It's a 3 act kind of play. You have, let's get you caught up, let's introduce you to a new part of this world, and then let's have our big conflict action set piece at the end. And at no point does it feel like it overstays in any of those parts, and it keeps you engaged the entire time. And it is absolutely a great film. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, 100%. I want to go back to Pandora. I want to see it again, and I want to see the next one.
I think we need to see it a few more times so we can make sure you get up to that 2 billion for old James to make, I guess, 4 or 5. He said, I think.
He'll be fine, but I'll still contribute. If I have a chance to see this movie again, I will try. But
I'm trying to convince Colleen, like, we can all go again, and then Colleen will come with it. But she's been very much like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to.
Get her, have her watch this. Have her watch this episode.
No, she'll be like, I don't want to watch
it. Yeah, 100%. The family stuff is a reason to see it, and not being able to see the same experience at home is another reason to see it.
Yep, I agree. Wholeheartedly agree. All right, well, I think that's as good a place as any to put a bow on this episode. Vactor, first time on the channel. I feel like we've been doing this for 100 years. So I've loved having you on. Hopefully have you on again at some point for anything, really. If you have an open invitation, you're welcome whenever. But where can people find you, or where do you want them to? Where should we guide them to? I have the link to your YouTube channel below. Is that where you're posting your stuff the most regularly?
Yeah, YouTube. I'm trying to do shorts every day, and TikTok and Instagram I'm trying to do as well, but YouTube is my primary place. Out of all the social medias and all of the different places, YouTube I found is the most enjoyable for me. So I would like the majority of my traffic to be to YouTube, but I'm also, just in case, catching some
give a link tree as well. I'll put your link tree link there too.
Yeah, that has everything where I'm posting on, but YouTube is my favorite.
Nice. Awesome. But yeah, you cover geeky topics. I mean, you have comic kaiju, holdo maneuver, or no, you're a guest on that one. Are you not?
Yes, I'm a editor. Actually, I was an original host on holdo maneuver, but because I was doing 6 podcasts at that point, so I've cut it back. Now I'm just doing a video game, a Star Trek, and a comic book. But I'm glad that you invited me, because Avatar does not fit into any of those podcasts. So I've been wanting to talk to someone about it, and I'm glad that this was a nice fit for me. So I had a great time here, and thank you very much.
Yes, no, I had a blast as well. That's why I like having this GDL2 channel. It's like, I need to talk about this. I'm glad that our worlds collided here, that we needed to nerd out about Avatar, and now we have our safe Avatar place right here on this channel. But please, go check out all of Vactor's content, especially the YouTube channel. Give us a subscribe and a follow. You do a fantastic job. Great high quality content. Just the production's amazing. The conversations are great. So absolutely can highly recommend your channel. But that will do it for this special episode. Thank you all, and until next time, hasta luego and goodbye. Have a great evening or day whenever you watch this.